After 5 years of marriage, my wife still absolutely refused to be intimate with me. I always assumed it was because she was shy. Until one day, I overheard her talking privately with her best friend. That day, her friend asked, "5 years married and you're still a virgin? Don't tell me you're saving your most precious gift for some Mr. Samuel out there?" Truth was, I'd known for a long time. But my wife never denied it. Her friend Isabella's voice rang out again. "So then, what exactly do you think of Benjamin? A fool? He's just my big toy." My wife's voice even carried a hint of amusement. But to my ears, it sounded like nails scraping glass, sharp, grating, unbearable. "If he's a toy, can I borrow him for a bit?" Isabella teased, completely shameless. I couldn't listen anymore. I shoved the office door open. 2 beautiful women were tangled together. A scene both chaotic and strangely alluring. I pretended not to notice. Walked straight to the tea table. When they saw me enter, the 2 women on the sofa instantly straightened up, blushing, quickly regaining their poised composure. Eyes wide as they stared at me. I said nothing. Turned and walked out of the CEO's office. Back at my desk, I opened a blank Word document and started typing. Just a 500-word resignation letter. Yet it took me 2 full hours to write. Before I knew it, it was already 5:30 p.m. Almost time to leave. Out of habit, I waited for her. The woman I'd protected for 2 years. Who also happened to be my boss. 10 minutes later, the 2 women stepped out of the office. Isabella lifted her chin proudly and giggled at me. "Handsome Benjamin Tilda. Your CEO said I could borrow you, Tilda." She hadn't even finished her sentence when a sharp "ah" escaped her lips. It was my wife, Taylor Swift. Pinching her waist hard. "We'll go ahead," Taylor Swift said to me coolly. Then stepped into the elevator with Isabella. I didn't look up, even as the elevator doors closed. I never once glanced her way. I picked up the resignation letter I'd prepared, walked into her office, and placed it on her cluttered desk. Work was over. It was over. I took a taxi straight to Taylor Swift's grandparents' house. Even though she didn't love me, they'd always loved me deeply, treating me like their own grandson. I gently told them I wanted to divorce Swift and would be moving out that day. They could only sigh helplessly, hoping I'd still visit often. The next day, I arrived at work late. In my 2 years at Washington, D.C., this was the first time I'd ever been late. The receptionists were so shocked their jaws dropped. Handsome Benjamin has never been late before. Today he didn't show up until 10 a.m. Yet he was still smiling warmly, greeting everyone one by one. The girls felt like spring had arrived. When silly Benjamin smiles, he's seriously too handsome. But then they remembered CEO Taylor's icy glare and quickly suppressed their excitement. As the CEO's right-hand man, Benjamin could turn any impossible task into something effortless. Compared to Taylor Swift's coldness, his warmth made him beloved by everyone. Of course, mostly because he was just that good-looking. Before stepping into the elevator, the senior receptionist, Henry, whispered to him, "The CEO's already upstairs and in a terrible mood." But Benjamin just smiled faintly, unfazed, and walked into the elevator. The CEO's office was on the 30th floor of Washington, D.C. Near the main door, in the hallway corner, was where he'd sat for an entire year. He didn't walk straight in. He knocked first. "Come in," a cold voice called from inside. Benjamin knew it was time to face her. The moment he stepped through the door, a flurry of papers flew straight at him, landing on his head and shoulders like falling snow. He looked down. Wasn't this his resignation letter from yesterday? "You didn't come home last night, that's fine. But now you want to quit too? Just how far are you planning to push this?" Gone was Taylor Swift's usual composure. Now she was furious, trembling with emotion. Last night, she'd been out with her friend until 9 p.m. Only when she got home did she realize Benjamin hadn't returned. She'd called him countless times, all unanswered. She'd been so worried she almost called the police. Only after calling her grandfather did she finally understand. Yesterday, Benjamin the silly Benjamin, had gone to visit her grandparents. Over the phone, her grandfather, the man who'd always adored her, had coldly said just one sentence: "Take care of yourself," then hung up. Completely bewildered, Taylor Swift had arrived at the office that morning, fuming with frustration, when she saw the resignation letter on her desk. She opened it and instantly exploded. And now, they were finally face to face. The moment she saw him, she unleashed a torrent of scolding. Never before had Taylor Swift ever worried about any man, so much that she was genuinely terrified. Benjamin looked at the woman before him. It had been 1 year since he started this job, and 2 years since they'd been together. Her usually cool, delicate face was now flushed with anger. Her dark, glistening eyes burned as if trying to set him ablaze. His tie was loose, the top 2 buttons of his shirt undone, and his expensive suit jacket casually slung over his shoulder. Taylor Swift sneered. "So this silent, refined act of yours? Is it your way of playing the handsome, brooding man in a suit?" She walked around the desk, stepping closer, reaching out to fasten his shirt buttons. But the moment her hand rose, he took a step back, putting distance between them. "I'm not joking. I really want to quit." Benjamin spoke calmly. He didn't dare stand too close to her. Just a little nearer, and his heart would soften. He was afraid he wouldn't be able to say no to her again. At that thought, he lowered his head. It was on a morning just like this one that Taylor Swift had once asked him, "Let's get married, okay?" Seeing the sincerity in her eyes, he hadn't hesitated, he nodded immediately. What he hadn't expected then was that he'd only ever be a tool for her to use. When Taylor Swift turned 25, she needed to become CEO of the company, as her grandfather wished. To do that, she had to claim the 30% stake her grandfather had been holding in trust for her. That stake had been left by her mother before she passed away, and her grandfather had managed it all these years. To reclaim it, she had to get married, and her husband had to be someone her grandfather approved of. So, encouraged by Isabella, she'd set her sights on her own personal assistant, the man who'd stood by her for a full year, Benjamin. Back then, she'd still been head of operations. He'd been her dedicated assistant. And just like that, in a single day, they'd gone from dating to married. Her grandparents were thrilled with their new son-in-law. An orphan, yes, but with a clean background, stellar academic record, and upright demeanor. Truly a match made in heaven. Everything went smoothly. She reclaimed her shares, defied her father's objections, and officially became CEO. Of course, aside from the chairman of the board, her father, Taylor Oliver, no one in the company knew they were married. Because of this, Chairman Taylor had once had a huge fight with his own father, Swift's grandfather, even threatening to cut ties. In the end, her grandfather had simply said, "That's the debt you owe your daughter's mother." Holding the marriage certificate in his hands, standing in their spacious new home, Benjamin knew this was the beginning of a contract marriage. But he'd already sunk too deep. Because he truly loved her. Not for anything else. Just to stay close to her. To protect her. And now, this nameless, shadowed marriage had reached its end. He looked at the woman before him, wanting nothing more than to pull her into one last tight embrace. But her heart had never belonged to him. He'd known that even before they married. Because across the ocean in England, there was still a young heir from the Samuel family. Her childhood sweetheart. Hearing Benjamin's words, Taylor Swift still didn't grasp the full picture. Her voice softened, and she gently took his hand. "Don't make a scene anymore, okay?" He froze. Taylor Swift, always cold and proud. Why was she suddenly so gentle? But her next words made everything clear. Grandfather said, "If we actually divorce, he'll take back my shares." Now he finally understood her true intention. He quietly pulled his hand away. His voice still gentle, but firm. "I'm not your toy. Let's get divorced." Taylor Swift stood stunned. A toy? Could it be? He'd overheard her joking with Isabella yesterday? She wanted to explain, but the words caught in her throat. Before she could say anything, he turned and walked out of her office, leaving the Washington, D.C. headquarters behind. 31st floor, chairman's office. By the large window, a tall man stood silently, watching his son-in-law walk away below. He knew everything, and now, he felt a pang of sorrow. As a father, after clashing with his own daughter for so many years, what had it all been for? This man named Benjamin. He'd once gone to great lengths to investigate him. The result? Clean as a blank sheet of paper. Though he was chairman of Washington, D.C. Group, he and his daughter, Taylor Swift, had never gotten along. Many years ago, Swift's mother had died in an accident, leaving father and daughter to rely on each other. But from that day on, Swift had blamed him, believing her mother's death was his fault. The night before the wedding, the two men had met. In front of Benjamin lay a prenuptial agreement. Without even reading it, he'd signed his name immediately. Not a single word exchange. That was how their first meeting had ended. Taylor Oliver had been deeply surprised. The contract was meant to protect both his daughter and Washington, D.C., and also to test the man's character. But aside from the two of them, no one else ever knew this had happened. Meanwhile, Taylor Swift stood by her own window, watching him disappear into the distance. His tall, slender figure disappeared at the bus stop, as if her very soul had vanished along with him. Suddenly remembering something, she grabbed the phone on her desk and frantically dialed that woman's number. The moment the call connected, Taylor Swift shouted, "Isabella, was it you yesterday? Did you deliberately trick me into saying those things so Benjamin would overhear? Are you happy now? He doesn't want me anymore." Isabella, calmly tending to her perfectly manicured nails, burst out laughing. "He doesn't want you anymore? Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted." Ha ha ha. Taylor Swift trembled with rage. "I'm being serious. How can you still joke about this?" Isabella didn't even bother saving face for her. She kept laughing. "Let me clarify something. I want Benjamin, not you." Ha ha. Staring at the disconnected call, Taylor Swift stood frozen. What was this woman up to? Could it be Isabella had been after Benjamin all along? Furious, she slammed the phone onto the desk. The device shuddered with each impact. On bus number 5, Benjamin sat quietly, swaying with every turn, and got off at the third to last stop. He'd been to this neighborhood many times over the past 3 months. The greenery was fully landscaped now, though it was a resettlement area from an old urban redevelopment project. The build quality was surprisingly good. He'd poured nearly all of his savings, close to $300 earned over several years, into this place. A small apartment, entirely his own. He took the elevator to the 11th floor. Unit 1107. He'd always loved this number. When they were choosing the place, Taylor Swift had asked if it held any special meaning. He hadn't answered, because it was a secret he intended to keep forever. A few months ago, when he mentioned wanting to buy a home, Taylor Swift immediately agreed without hesitation. She disliked the wedding house her father had prepared, filled with American furniture, preferring European style instead. What she didn't realize was that Benjamin's entire savings could only afford a modest 70 square meter unit. 2 bedrooms, 1 living room. Though it was a turnkey property, he'd had to furnish it slowly, month by month, like an ant carrying grains home, on a monthly salary barely over $10. After living expenses and his fixed $2 monthly donation to the orphanage, he had less than $2.500 left. So far, he'd barely bought any new furniture. When selecting the floor and unit number, Benjamin had brought her along. He'd chosen this one instantly. Back then, Taylor Swift had only seen it as a lovely, couple-like experience, a shared step toward building a real marriage. But for Benjamin, it was different. Because in his entire 26 years of life, this was the first home he'd ever bought himself. A true place to call his own. He'd once imagined bringing Taylor Swift here on weekends, to this space that belonged only to the two of them. But now, he was alone. He unlocked the door, Inside, the apartment still felt very empty. He took off his suit jacket and hung it on the balcony hook. The fabric was high quality, soft to the touch. Taylor Swift had custom ordered it for him, costing several tens of thousands. Now, it seemed he wouldn't be wearing it again. He checked his finances. Less than $5 left in his account. Enough to last a few months. But the orphanage donation would need rethinking. If necessary, he'd have to take on extra work to welcome his return to single life. He went out and bought the missing household essentials. He filled the fridge with fresh, affordable vegetables from the nearby market. Most neighbors here were elderly, kind, gentle, and warm. At noon, he lay down on the sofa for a short rest, when his phone suddenly rang. It was Taylor Swift. He didn't want to answer, but it kept ringing. Just as he was about to pick up, the call ended. A few seconds later, it rang again, urgent, almost desperate. Others might see Taylor Swift as cold, but Benjamin knew better. She was simply resolute, serious and dedicated in her work. And once she set her mind on something, she never gave up easily. "Hello," Benjamin answered, managing only one word, before Taylor Swift's voice erupted from the other end. "Benjamin, are you serious? Where are you right now? Get back here immediately. Hurry up." Benjamin sighed. This woman still thought he was just bluffing. He replied calmly, "I'm already home. I won't be returning to Washington, D.C. Whenever you're free, let's go finalize the divorce paperwork." "Home? I'm at our home right now." "Which home are you talking about?" Her voice was still sharp with frustration. Benjamin could easily picture her furious expression. He didn't argue, just said evenly, "I'm at Taylor Matthew Garden." Taylor Swift fell silent. After a long pause, she snapped, "You just wait." Quietly, Benjamin thought to himself, "I've waited for you for years. I don't want to wait anymore." Next step, find a new job. Even though he hadn't officially submitted his resignation yet, he still needed to plan for his life ahead. He didn't own a computer. He'd only just got an internet installed at home. Thinking of this, Benjamin stood up and headed out. He needed to find a place to buy a used laptop, or else he wouldn't be able to work at all. By the time he returned with a well-worn ThinkPad, God only knew how many previous owners it had had. It was already 5 p.m., dusk settling over the neighborhood. He'd spent hours wandering the second basement level of the computer market, where second-hand electronics were sold, and finally snagged a laptop that looked like it was about to retire. Its black keys were polished smooth from years of use. But as long as it worked, that was all that mattered. And of course, the price was dirt cheap, that's why he bought it. The moment he opened the door, Benjamin sensed something was off. Light spilled through the crack under the door. That wasn't right. He was certain he'd turned off all the lights before leaving. He set the laptop bag down, pushed the door open a little further, and saw a pair of red-soled high heels lying on the floor. Strangely, that put him at ease. There she was, the woman, half lounging, half sitting on the sofa, flicking through TV channels with the remote, her brows furrowed in clear impatience. Her bare, smooth legs dangled carelessly over the edge of the couch, stockingless and pale in the dim light. Hearing the door close, she glanced at him briefly, then turned her eyes back to the screen, pretending nothing was happening. Benjamin sighed inwardly. What's meant to happen will happen. Without a word, he walked to the table and set down his newly bought laptop. Just as he was about to head to the bathroom, he noticed something odd: a pink face towel, an electric toothbrush, and a clutter of random bottles and jars crowding the sink. He rushed to the bedroom. A silver suitcase sat on the floor. The closet door was slightly ajar. He opened it and found Taylor Swift's clothes neatly hung in a row. Back in the living room, he looked at the woman on the sofa and asked quietly, "Swift, what exactly are you trying to do?" Taylor Swift's expression changed instantly. Barefoot, she sprang up and stepped right in front of him, beaming, "Honey, let's live here from now on." Benjamin froze. Since their marriage, she'd never once called him honey. But that word had come far too late. Seeing him stunned, Taylor Swift was clearly pleased with herself. She sauntered back to the sofa and resumed watching TV. Honey, she cooed. I'm hungry. Benjamin thought he'd misheard. He took a deep breath, said nothing, and silently walked into the kitchen, closing the door behind him. His mind was in chaos. How had Taylor Swift even found this place? And moved in already? He smacked his forehead. When he'd gotten the keys, he'd casually made a spare and slipped it into her keychain, even labeling it 1107. This place had always been hers too. She'd been there when they picked the unit and number. He just never imagined she'd actually come. He walked to the far corner of the kitchen, pulled out his phone, thought for a moment, then decided to call her grandfather. Hello, Grandpa. It's Benjamin. He lowered his voice, worried she might overhear. Ah, Benjamin. His grandfather replied immediately. Swift's with you already, isn't she? That made him uneasy. She came this morning. The old man continued gently. Said she doesn't want a divorce anymore. Pleaded with us for hours. Then she started crying. I couldn't say no. Benjamin fell silent. He understood the old man's heart, even though he'd made his intention to divorce clear yesterday. Grandparents never truly wanted their grandchildren's marriage to fall apart. But what about Taylor Swift? Was she coming back out of genuine feeling? Or just because of those shares? He didn't know. Let her stay with you for now. His grandfather went on, his tone shifting. She never liked the place you two lived in before. Just live together for a while. See if your feelings can improve. Yesterday, the old man had said he understood. Now he'd already changed his mind. Benjamin rubbed his temples. He'd thought that once he resigned and left the company, he'd never have to see her again. Who knew he'd end up living with her once more? At this point, kicking her out probably wouldn't work. Might as well wait and see. With a heavy heart, Benjamin spent half an hour cooking a surprisingly decent meal. After all, today was their first day moving in together. A fresh start. He couldn't let things feel too cold. Meanwhile, the woman in the living room kept her eyes glued to the TV, though her thoughts were clearly elsewhere. CEO Taylor, never absent before, had left work early today. Word was, it was because assistant Benjamin had quit. The news spread through the company like wildfire. Single women everywhere were buzzing with excitement. Now it was confirmed, Benjamin was officially single. In truth, for the past 2 years, the whole company had whispered that Benjamin was the CEO's man. Otherwise, how else could he have followed her? All the way from operations, straight into the CEO's office? A brilliant woman, a handsome man, and her closest aide. Of course people would read into it. But Benjamin had never cared about those rumors, because the truth of his relationship with Taylor Swift went far beyond what anyone imagined. Dinner's ready. He set the dishes on the table and called softly. The woman slowly rose from the sofa, bare feet padding across the marble floor, tiptoeing toward him. Benjamin looked at her, feeling utterly helpless. He set down a bowl, turned toward the shoe cabinet by the door, opened the top compartment, and pulled out a shoebox. These slippers had been ready for a long time, always kept carefully at the very top, never expecting they'd actually be used today. Taylor Swift watched as the man before her knelt down and placed the slippers right in front of her feet. She didn't put them on herself. Instinctively, she lifted one foot. At home, she'd never liked wearing slippers, because Benjamin always kept the floors spotless. Walking barefoot had always felt perfectly comfortable. Yet every time he saw her like this, Benjamin would always gently bring her slippers, saying a woman's feet shouldn't get cold. He didn't know how many times this had happened. It had practically become routine between them. Benjamin paused. But this time, he wasn't the same as before. He didn't automatically kneel to slip the slippers onto her feet. His right hand had barely reached out before he firmly pulled it back. They were about to divorce. Doing things like this no longer made sense. He stood up straight, avoiding her gaze, and turned toward the kitchen to get chopsticks. Taylor Swift remained frozen in place. One foot still lifted mid-air. Dinner passed quickly. Both of them ate in silence. 4 savory dishes and 1 soup. Some salty, some mild, all simple and easy to eat. Benjamin hadn't cooked anything elaborate. Just a few humble home-style dishes. That usually suited her taste perfectly. Yet today, they felt strangely different. Taylor Swift kept stealing glances at him. His expression was calm, composed. The kind of quiet steadiness that usually made others feel at ease. Thinking back to what had just happened, she felt a vague discomfort, but couldn't pinpoint exactly what was bothering her. After the meal, Benjamin went into the kitchen to wash the dishes, then wiped the floors and tidied up. Meanwhile, Taylor Swift sat dazed on the sofa, still unable to process what was happening. Suddenly, it hit her. It was the feeling of being deliberately ignored. The indifference Benjamin was showing her. Before, no matter how exhausted he was, he'd always gently ask what she wanted to eat, help her into her slippers, and check if she wanted fruit after dinner. Truth was, most of the time, Taylor Swift had only given half-hearted replies, or just mumbled something to get by, sometimes not even bothering to answer at all. But now that these little habits, once so familiar, had vanished, she felt an unexpected sense of loss. Because to Benjamin, she no longer seemed to be the most important person. She'd never felt this way before. She stared at the closed kitchen door in the distance, her bright eyes slowly dimming. They'd been married for over a year. Peaceful, undisturbed. So why had he suddenly resigned and demanded a divorce? What was this gentle man really thinking? Even as he washed dishes, Benjamin's mind kept circling, weighing his next steps carefully. Of course, he wasn't thinking about his relationship with Taylor Swift. She'd never liked him to begin with. Right now, she only wanted to pull him back, because his resignation and divorce demand had embarrassed her. A blow to her pride. And she was afraid her grandfather would reclaim her shares. Give it a few days, and once her anger cooled, she'd accept it. In fact, he'd already told her grandfather not to let his situation affect Swift's position at the company. Though young, she worked hard and truly deserved to be CEO. That's why, even if they divorced, her grandfather had promised not to take back the shares he'd already transferred to her. Everything would return to calm. They'd go back to how things were before. No one bothering the other. Living quietly side by side. Unable to sleep past midnight, Taylor Swift dragged herself out for a glass of water, and noticed a red glow on the balcony. It was the ember of a cigarette. Benjamin had never smoked. At least, not in front of her. Even after 2 years together. Even after moments of intimacy. She'd never once smelled smoke on him. When he saw her step out, Benjamin immediately stubbed out the cigarette and closed the window. Taylor Swift said nothing, just watched him silently. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "Benjamin, you have someone else now, don't you?" He shook his head. "It wasn't about that." "Then why do you want to leave?" Taylor Swift pressed, unwilling to let go. "Is it because I wouldn't be with you?" Seeing him stay silent, she forced out the words, her face burning red in the dark. Benjamin looked at her and gave a bitter, quiet smile. They were married. Shouldn't they have been able to be together? At first, he'd truly believed that. But on their wedding night, her grandfather had plied him with so much wine that, in his drunken haze, he'd tried to kiss her, only to be pushed away immediately. From that night on, sleeping separately became the norm. And he'd finally understood his place. He was just a tool in a contract. She was saving herself, for someone else. Isabella had been right. He was an orphan, alone in the world, with no power or status. How could he ever dream of a princess? "I'm tired," Benjamin said softly. "I don't want to keep living like this." "Don't worry. Grandpa already said it. Even if we divorce, your shares won't be taken back." He addressed her deepest fear directly, so she wouldn't cause more trouble. A faint trace of mint drifted through the air. Taylor Swift stood rooted to the spot, as if struck by lightning. That night, Benjamin slept soundly. because he'd finally said everything he needed to. From now on, they'd walk separate paths. But Taylor Swift couldn't sleep. Her mind tangled like knotted thread, tossing and turning until dawn. Only when exhaustion finally washed over her like a tide did she drift off. When she woke up, it was already noon. Still groggy, she sat up and realized the apartment was empty. No messages on her phone either. Had he gone out? Then she remembered. It was the weekend. No work today. Her stomach growled loudly. And Benjamin was nowhere to be found. Why aren't you back cooking yet? In truth, Benjamin had left the apartment very early that morning. He'd tiptoed out quietly, careful not to disturb Taylor Swift's sleep. Downstairs, he jogged a few laps around the residential complex, grabbed some breakfast, and prepared to head back. Beside the small flower garden on the ground floor, a silver-gray Maserati was parked, no need to check the license plate. He knew instantly it was Taylor Swift's. Benjamin chose a stone bench not far away, eating his breakfast, while waiting for her to drag her suitcase downstairs and leave. Last night, everything had been made clear. Wasn't she afraid that divorce would trigger her grandfather to reclaim her shares? Now that that worry was gone, she surely wouldn't waste any more time staying with him. It was the weekend. Benjamin wasn't in a rush. Let Swift sleep a little longer. But to his surprise, this wait stretched on for 3 full hours. It was already past noon, and the Maserati remained perfectly still, showing no sign of leaving. His phone suddenly buzzed in his pocket. Benjamin pulled it out. Swift flashed on the screen. "Benjamin, I'm hungry." Her soft voice came through the line, shattering the last layer of his calm. "Come home quick. I want your wine-braised greens." Was she starving to madness? It wasn't even the season for fresh wild greens. Benjamin sighed helplessly, hung up, and stood to head back toward the building. "Benjamin, I'm thirsty. Benjamin, I'm hungry. Benjamin, I'm tired." Every day, Taylor Swift repeated these same lines. Benjamin knew exactly what to do. Brew her rose tea, add a spoonful of honey, bring in the butter cookies he'd prepped, and massage her stiff shoulders from sitting too long at her desk. Swift had grown so used to this routine that she never thought it odd. But now, he no longer had any obligation to cater to her demands. Dressed in pink pajamas, she sat on the sofa waiting for him. When he walked in, her eyes sparkled with mischief. Benjamin knew exactly what she was thinking. He could read every nuance of her expressions if he wanted to. But most of the time, he chose not to use that ability. It drained him too much. Over the years, he'd saved every penny thanks to this skill. His workload had grown steadily, and so had his pay. It was his secret. Few in Taylor Building knew. Lunch was simple and silent again. Neither of them spoke. That afternoon, as Benjamin browsed the web on his laptop, her familiar scent drifted close, that distinct fragrance uniquely hers. He immediately closed his browser, but her sharp eyes had already caught something. "Are you going to Charlie?" Taylor Swift finally couldn't hold back and blurted out. Charlie Group was Washington, D.C.'s equal rival in Taylor Building, and the family business of her closest friend, Isabella. "I knew it." Taylor Swift's face flushed, her eyes glistening with tears. "You're going there to see Isabella, aren't you?" She suddenly lunged at Benjamin, flailing her arms wildly. Her outburst startled him. He was planning to go to Charlie, but only to find a stable job, not to see Isabella at all. Even a master could be overwhelmed by chaotic strikes, let alone a woman who'd completely lost control. Afraid she might hurt herself, Benjamin wrapped his arms tightly around her. Suddenly, the world fell silent. No more crying, no more noise, just the sound of 2 young people breathing, holding each other close. "Let me go." A voice like an angel murmured against his chest. But he didn't dare loosen his grip. If he did, his face would be covered in scratches. How could he go to an interview looking like that? The woman in his arms seemed to calm down, no longer resisting. She softened like a cloud, growing gentler by the second. Benjamin never imagined their most intimate moment would happen like this. Taylor Swift didn't dare lift her head, her flushed face buried deep in his chest. That shyness made the weekend feel strangely magical. Both kept their thoughts hidden, and time slipped quietly away. Monday morning arrived as usual, traffic thick and bustling. Taylor Swift's Maserati had left early. Benjamin stepped out of the residential complex, boarded a bus, and after nearly 40 minutes, arrived at the Morgan building in the new district, the headquarters of Charlie Group. Standing beneath the 40-story tower, he looked up and couldn't help but marvel. Charlie really was stronger than Washington, D.C. After signing in at the reception desk, he was given a temporary staff badge. With 15 minutes to spare before his turn, he headed to the HR interview area on the 20th floor. Benjamin sat quietly in the waiting area. Around him, many young candidates had already gathered. Proof that Charlie ran an impressive recruitment operation. On his way here, countless female Charlie employees must have caught sight of him and felt their hearts skip. Since when did the company have such a handsome guy? Tall, lean, and gentle in demeanor, he clearly gave the company's single women reason to hope. Seeing him seated in the waiting area, one female staffer had already rushed to HR to ask who the handsome interviewee was. Candidates were being called in one by one. Benjamin remained calm. Charlie was his top choice. The company's core business was real estate, and the position he'd applied for was in sales. Salary was definitely going to be high. When his name was finally called, he stood and walked into the interview room. Facing him across the long conference table were two interviewers, one older, the other clearly her younger assistant. When Benjamin saw the senior interviewer, he froze for a split second. At that exact moment, she looked up, recognized his face, quickly glanced down at the file in her hands, then suddenly shot to her feet in alarm, leaving her assistant utterly bewildered. "Mr. Benjamin, hello, I had no idea it was you." She addressed him with the respectful title, teacher, a term of high regard. In truth, Benjamin had anticipated this possibility when he decided to apply, but it was still an uncanny coincidence. 3 months ago, he'd handled a case where the lead contact was none other than the woman before him. Matthew, Charlie Group's HR director. Benjamin lightly scratched his nose and said, "Hello, Director Matthew. I'm here to interview for the sales department position." He stated his purpose clearly, but it was precisely that calm demeanor that made Matthew even more nervous. A master of his caliber applying for a regular sales role? She didn't know how to handle this at all. Remembering the astonishing skill and insight he demonstrated during their last collaboration, Matthew felt even more certain that the man before her was far deeper than he appeared. "Rowan, please step outside for a moment." After all, she was the head of our. Once her assistant left, Matthew adjusted her glasses and asked gently, "Mr. Benjamin, are you really here to interview?" Benjamin gave an awkward smile. "Director Matthew, I truly am here to apply for the job." His answer eased her anxiety somewhat. There was something oddly soothing about this man's voice. After a few simple questions about his work experience and a quick review of his resume, Matthew found his background spotless. Only one detail surprised her. Under marital status, he'd written married. At his age, that was rare. "Mr. Benjamin, please wait here for a moment. I'll be right back." Benjamin nodded. He assumed she'd gone to fetch the sales director for a joint interview. But over 10 minutes passed with no sign of her return. Alone in the large, empty conference room, he checked his watch, puzzled. As the last candidate of the morning session, the hallway outside had already cleared out. Yet female employees kept passing by, sneaking glances into the room. What was that about? Suddenly, a familiar fragrance drifted in. Benjamin looked up, and couldn't help but smile wryly. "Of course, it's her. It really is you, Benjamin." He stood and replied with a gentle smile. "Yes, it's me." Isabella suddenly stepped close, her beautiful face now less than 5 centimeters from his. She glanced around furtively, then leaned in and whispered near his ear, as if sharing a secret. "So you're the Mr. Benjamin?" Benjamin scratched his nose, stepped back slightly, and nodded awkwardly. "Yes. Matthew must have told Isabella everything. After all, as CEO, she had every right to know. The last time he'd worked on that case, Isabella had been overseas, so they'd never met. Back then, Benjamin had been slightly worried, since Isabella was Taylor Swift's closest friend. If Swift found out, it could cause serious trouble. But in the end, he'd resolved everything smoothly. And Isabella hadn't shown up once. Isabella burst out laughing, a sound so bright it seemed to light up the entire room. She was open, sincere, and refreshingly direct. Benjamin actually liked people like her, clear. No beating around the bush. Isabella took the head seat at the table, and Benjamin obediently sat beside her. After all, she was the boss here. He was just a job applicant. After a pause, she asked, "You're really not Swift's assistant anymore?" Benjamin replied calmly, "I've already resigned from Washington, D.C." Isabella's eyes immediately sparkled with curiosity, like tiny stars flickering in her gaze. "Did something happen between you and Swift?" "We're getting divorced," Benjamin said softly. Isabella fell silent, saying nothing more. The room sank back into quiet. Benjamin didn't dwell on it. He knew that in his current position, landing a job at Charlie wouldn't be easy. He stood up and said politely to Isabella, "Sorry for the trouble today. I'll take my leave." Isabella blinked in surprise, then laughed out loud. "Aren't you here to interview? Why are you leaving?" Benjamin scratched his nose and asked, "CEO Addison, do I still have a chance?" The title, CEO Addison, clearly pleased her. Though she was Swift's best friend, she and Benjamin had only crossed paths a handful of times over the past 2 years. Looking at the handsome man before her, her mind raced. Her eyes flickered as she studied him. Then she said gently, "Be my assistant." Benjamin frowned slightly. "I applied for a sales position." Isabella arched an eyebrow, skeptical. "You're this good looking, and you really want to do sales?" Benjamin answered honestly, "Because it pays well." At that, Isabella burst into laughter again. "You, short on money?" Benjamin didn't smile, he meant it. Seeing his serious expression, Isabella stopped joking and asked earnestly, "Are you absolutely sure you don't want to be my assistant?" Benjamin shook his head. $20,000 a month. Deal. By the time Benjamin walked out of Charlie's headquarters, it was nearly noon. He looked up at the sun overhead and felt, for the first time, that his new life was truly beginning. With this job, he'd earn more, and the kids at the orphanage would live better. That was the real meaning and purpose of his work. In fact, all the money he'd saved over the years had been set aside for them. The leaky roof needed fixing. The old beds needed replacing. And the backyard playground needed repairs. Though the orphanage now housed fewer than 30 children, daily expenses still added up. Once, Benjamin's foster mother said something that changed his perspective. That day, the usually gentle and kind woman spoke to him with unusual seriousness. "I know you're a good child. But now that you've left this place, you're your own person. You need to start thinking about your own future and your own family. A truly responsible man is one who takes care of his loved ones. Only when you're thriving out, there will I feel at peace and truly happy for you." Hearing those words, Benjamin began seriously considering buying a home. Though his savings weren't huge, they were enough in Taylor Building to afford a modest place. But when he mentioned his plan, Taylor Swift offered to chip in her own money to buy something bigger. Benjamin refused. It wasn't about male pride. It was his way of telling Taylor Swift, "I may not be rich, but I'm willing to give you everything I have." Benjamin slung his suit jacket over his shoulder and looked up at the sky. Time to start over, he told himself. That morning, Taylor Swift went to work but couldn't focus. She kept replaying the moment they'd held each other the day before, the faint, intoxicating scent of mint on his skin. But then she remembered he'd gone to interview at Charlie, and would now be working under Isabella, her best friend. The thought made her deeply uneasy. Just as she'd expected, Isabella called at noon. Swift, on her lunch break in the office, put the call on speaker. A teasing voice rang out. Little Swift, what are you up to? Swift didn't bother with pleasantries. Just say what you need. Isabella didn't take offense. They'd always been blunt with each other. But Swift suddenly had a bad feeling. Are you and Benjamin really getting divorced? Isabella's voice rose sharply, making Swift's heart pound. How did she find out? No. For the first time, Swift stammered in front of Isabella. A loud, mocking laugh came through the speaker. So long and gleeful it lasted nearly a full minute. Benjamin's about to become my assistant. Ha ha ha. And with that, Isabella hung up. Swift sat frozen. She'd known Benjamin was interviewing at Charlie today. But she never imagined he'd end up as Isabella's assistant. Was this on purpose? And Benjamin? Why did he have to choose Charlie of all places? Furious, Swift trembled with rage. Tonight, I'm going to teach that deserter a lesson he won't forget. In the CEO's office at Charlie Group, Isabella had her long legs propped up on the desk, filing her nails as she listened to the story of what had happened 3 months ago. Across from her, HR manager Matthew was recounting the entire incident. When she finished, she added a reminder. Ms. Addison, we did sign a confidentiality agreement back then. This matter? Isabella waved a hand. She understood. After Matthew left, Isabella's face bloomed into a spring-like smile. So Benjamin has secrets like this. She grew even more curious about him, almost forgetting he was still the legal husband of her best friend. After the interview, Benjamin had nothing else to do that afternoon. So he headed back to the orphanage. He fixed up the backyard playground, then sat on the steps to rest, watching the handful of preschoolers play. Though there were only 5 or 6 of them, their energy filled the air. His foster mother brought him a cold soda, set it beside him, and asked gently, "How are you holding up, Isabella?" Benjamin looked up at her in the sunlight, warmth spreading through his chest. "Mom, I'm starting at Charlie soon. They're paying really well." She ruffled his hair, just as she always had when he was a boy growing up. "Just don't work yourself too hard, okay?" Benjamin nodded softly. He almost told her about Taylor Swift, but stopped himself. He didn't want to worry her. Pointing to a small garden in the corner of the yard, he asked, "Did Kevin come back to fix that?" His mom nodded. "He was here for 2 days last week, but couldn't wait for you." Benjamin sighed. It had been so long since they'd seen each other. He wondered how his old friend was doing now. By the time he got home, it was past 5 p.m. On the way, he'd picked up some fresh vegetables from the market near his building. The apartment was dark. Maybe Swift won't be coming back anymore, he thought. He'd pack up her things later and send them to her. He felt neither disappointment nor sadness, because this was his choice, his path. Just before 6 p.m., the door suddenly clicked open with a key. Taylor Swift's face peeked through the gap, slightly tired, but her eyes still bright and full of life. Benjamin was still sitting at the dining table, focused on his laptop, preparing documents for his new job, completely unaware. Then, out of nowhere, his right ear was pinched hard. "Benjamin, you've got some nerve. Daring to become Isabella's assistant?" Taylor Swift was genuinely furious. Despite Benjamin's 178 centimeters frame, the petite woman had him by the ear like a scolded chick. He didn't resist, just sighed helplessly. "They're paying way too much." That single line left Taylor Swift speechless. This man had never spoken so bluntly before. He'd always been calm, gentle, composed. "I don't care, I'm a proper young lady. Don't I have any dignity? What will people say when they find out my husband's working as some woman's assistant?" Though her words were sharp, her grip on his ear noticeably softened. Benjamin wasn't angry. He knew this was just her usual temper flaring up. He sighed gently and said, "Swift, stop making a scene." That tender tone melted Taylor Swift's heart instantly. He was back to being the old Benjamin again. Just then, the phone rang, shattering the fragile moment between them. Taylor Swift glanced at the screen and saw 3 characters starting with Samuel. Like a startled rabbit, she jumped up and dashed into her room. Benjamin watched her flustered retreat. and understood exactly what was happening. That Samuel guy was calling again. To say he didn't care would be a lie. What husband could calmly accept? His wife still keeping contact with another man? He pushed down the sadness rising in his chest and turned toward the kitchen to start cooking. He closed the kitchen door, maybe to block out the sound, or maybe just to focus on making a proper meal. As he measured the rice, he automatically scooped portions for two. It seemed she wasn't leaving tonight after all. Dinner was quiet and bland. Taylor Swift kept stealing glances at Benjamin's face. Still as calm as still water. Impossible to read. In truth, that call had only lasted a few polite exchanges. Before she hung up, she wasn't sure if she'd cut it short out of fear someone might overhear, or because there was truly nothing left to say to the man all the way in England. Benjamin had never shown any reaction before. But why did the stir? Fried potatoes taste so sour today? What's wrong? Noticing her frown, Benjamin finally spoke. Are you feeling unwell? He was finally talking to her again. She exhaled in relief. No, it's just the potatoes today. Seem like you added too much vinegar. Really? Benjamin picked up a piece, tasted it, then said, I don't taste any sourness. Taylor Swift stuck out her tongue and swallowed a bite of rice. It's definitely too much vinegar. Then she gently steered the conversation. So, you're really set on working at Charlie? From there, the talk flowed more easily. She pretended to ask casually, how much is Isabella paying you? She knew his old salary. Truth was, they weren't short on money at home. Most expenses were just small daily things. Why did he need to chase after more cash? 20,000. Benjamin replied softly. What? Taylor Swift shot up. So fast she banged her knee hard against the table, thud. The chopsticks on the table jumped. Wearing thin home clothes. Tears instantly welled in her eyes from the pain. How can Isabella be paying you that much? Her voice was still shaky from pain, but full of accusation. Her eyes glistened as she looked at him. I don't know either. Benjamin said with a wry smile, shaking his head. Then come back, she said softly, her gaze sincere. I'll pay you 20,000 too. Benjamin froze, then gave a bitter laugh and shook his head. It's not about the money. Taylor Swift's chest heaved with anger. So you're really set on following Isabella? I'm just going to work. Why do you keep saying, following? Benjamin looked up at the pouting woman. HMPH. Taylor Swift turned her face away. Suddenly, she was lifted off the ground. Instinctively, she wrapped her arms around his neck. Benjamin gently carried her to the sofa, set her down, and said, don't take a shower tonight, no hot water. All the anger in Taylor Swift's heart instantly melted away. She didn't even understand why she'd turned so soft all of a sudden. Lately, this had happened several times. Taylor Swift no longer had the energy to get angry. Watching Benjamin clear the dishes, wipe the table, and even sweep the floor, she quietly pulled out her phone and snapped a photo. Then she opened Facebook, found the contact she'd nicknamed Batman, whose profile picture was none other than Isabella's smug face, and sent the photo of Benjamin mopping the floor straight to her. She tossed her phone aside and happily turned on the TV. At a gray villa in the suburbs, Isabella was bored out of her mind, scrolling through a game, when a Facebook notification popped up. She opened it and immediately cursed. That damn girl. So eager to show off. Huh? Just wait till tomorrow. I'll pay you back in full. The next morning, as Benjamin was about to leave the apartment, Taylor Swift grabbed his arm. She grabbed her handbag and walked with him downstairs, saying as they went, today, I'm driving you to work. Benjamin froze. What's gotten into her now? She was seriously going to drop him off at Charlie? He started to protest, but one sharp glare from her shut him right up. Reluctantly, he climbed into the passenger seat. The moment he closed the door, the engine roared to life. The acceleration was so forceful it slammed him back into his seat. He'd ridden with her before, but today felt different, like heading into battle. Her eyes burned with such fierce intensity he didn't dare make a sound. When they reached the Charlie building, Benjamin reached for the door handle. But Taylor Swift hit the central lock. Both doors clicked shut. What's she up to now? She scanned the crowd gathering near the entrance, clearly searching for someone. A moment later, her eyes lit up. The Maserati revved loudly in place, the engine's thunderous growl shaking the entire plaza. Benjamin wanted to vanish into the ground. How am I supposed to face my first day at work after this humiliation? Numerous Charlie employees turned to stare, whispering and pointing. But Taylor Swift wasn't done yet. She deliberately gunned the engine a few more times, making the whole street rumble. Finally, a sleek red Ferrari pulled up slowly beside them. The main event had arrived. Taylor Swift rolled down her window. The Ferrari's driver turned to look. The two women's eyes locked in midair, sparks flying. Benjamin wanted to run, but didn't dare move a muscle. If he stepped out now, both women would surely call his name at the same time, and he'd die of social embarrassment on the spot. Well, look who it is. Isabella's voice cut through the air, sharp as a blade. Dressed to impress, she added with a smirk. What brings little Miss Swift to our Charlie today? Taylor Swift shot back instantly. I'm dropping off my husband for work. Don't you dare bully him. She even shook a fist right in Isabella's face. Weren't you two about to divorce? Isabella purred, her tone dripping with mockery. Ex-husband would be more accurate. Great, we've just kicked a hornet's nest. Taylor Swift's right hand immediately clamped down on Benjamin's waist, nails digging in. She gritted her teeth and hissed at him. This is all your fault. But if they dragged this out any longer, he'd be late for work. With a sigh, she unlocked the doors, shoved him out, then floored the gas, peeling away down the street. In front of Charlie like she just staked a dramatic territorial claim. This little spectacle instantly became the hottest gossip at Charlie that day. Did you hear? The young miss from Washington, D.C. personally drove some gorgeous guy to Charlie for his first day, and had a full-on showdown with CEO Addison right at the front gate. On his very first day at Charlie, Benjamin instantly became the center of attention. Fortunately, Isabella held absolute authority here. No one dared barge into the CEO's office just to gawk at the new handsome hire. And Isabella herself didn't seem to care at all. She casually led Benjamin upstairs. The moment they entered her office, she kicked off her high heels and hopped barefoot onto her oversized executive chair. Benjamin glanced around. The desk in the corner was clearly meant for him. Unlike Washington, D.C., Charlie's office had an open layout. The CEO's assistant sat right inside the office itself, likely for smoother communication. Without overthinking it, he quietly took his seat. What he didn't know was that this very desk had been personally ordered by the CEO herself the night before, and it took 4 logistics staff half an hour to haul it in. His onboarding was handled swiftly. HR Director Matthew processed everything herself, efficient, clean, and hassle-free. Before leaving, Matthew even walked him to the door and said respectfully, "Mr. Benjamin, take care." Benjamin was an exceptional assistant. He quickly fell into rhythm, organizing the CEO's morning schedule, coordinating cross-departmental meetings, all executed with seamless precision, as if they'd worked together for years. Isabella was pleasantly surprised to discover that with just a glance or a subtle expression from her, Benjamin would instantly anticipate and handle everything flawlessly. This remarkable ability only reinforced what Matthew had told her before. He can read people's expressions and unspoken intentions. How does he do that? Isabella rested her chin in her hand, watching the man not far away. Benjamin was bent over his desk, reviewing data and reports. Though they hadn't known each other long, she'd always thought of him as simply a handsome man with a gentle, jade-like demeanor. Now she realized he'd been hiding a formidable talent all along. Curiosity stirred, and she nearly did something that went against her own principles. Of course, she had her own agenda. She'd been quietly preparing a plan for a long time. It was high time those old, useless executives, who did nothing but collect paychecks, made way for new blood. Last time, Matthew had brought Benjamin in, and they'd smoothly eliminated one of them. Who would be next? Isabella narrowed her eyes, her gaze softening even more as it settled on Benjamin. This man will definitely help me, right? Suddenly, Benjamin looked up, his clear eyes meeting hers as she watched him. That pure, direct gaze caught her off guard, pulling her in like a current. Only when he lowered his head again did Isabella snap back to reality. She silently scolded herself. Absolutely do not get distracted by his looks. I hired him for a grand mission. Lunchtime passed in a rush. Charlie employees ate at the self-service cafeteria. Today, Benjamin ate slightly more than usual. In the afternoon, Isabella finally had a moment to breathe. She stretched, her slender waist briefly visible, but no one was watching. Benjamin, meanwhile, was still deep in company documents, studying Charlie's business structure and financial performance. The company specialized in real estate, particularly urban renewal projects, and held a distinct competitive edge. Washington, D.C., by contrast, focused more on developing and operating high-end shopping malls. The two firms were, in a way, indirectly connected. Benjamin, I'm thirsty, Isabella called out. He startled slightly. Her tone sounded eerily like Taylor Swift's. But Isabella's voice carried a soft, melodic Jongnan lilt, likely from her family background. It felt oddly familiar to Benjamin. Many of his college classmates had spoken with that same gentle accent. Seeing Isabella lounging in her chair, he stood and headed to the tea station. Glancing at the available ingredients, he quickly brewed a cup of rose tea, added a spoonful of honey and a pinch of dried tangerine peel, then placed it gently before her. The floral aroma of the tea, the subtle citrus aftertaste, and the light sweetness of honey blended perfectly. Isabella took a sip, and her eyes lit up. This is really good. Looking at the man before her, she couldn't help but marvel. My eyes really are sharp. With an assistant like this, she could practically win while lying down. But when should she start the plan? Isabella sighed, already feeling a headache coming on.